All right, at this point, I have my case. It's fully sanded. I have my 3 drawers, and I have my 3 drawer fronts that I've made. At this point, your drawer fronts should be the same length as your case. So, same length. However, if you put all 3 of them together, the 3 drawer fronts should actually be wider than the actual case itself. That's normal, and that's where you want to be. At this point, we're going to start to make the individual drawer fronts fit this case. So what we're going to do first is we are going to measure out the drawer front for the bottom drawer first. We do the bottom first, then we do the top, and then we finally do the middle at the very end. To figure out the size of the bottom drawer front, take your ruler and you want to measure the distance from the bottom of the case, right here, to the very top of that slot. So as I'm looking at my ruler here, it's 2 inches and 8/32, otherwise known as 2 1/4. So this drawer front needs to be 2 1/4. So at this stage, I'm going to use my square, my ruler, and my pencil, and I'm going to measure 2 1/4. As you can see, I've got my gross edge here and my pretty edge here. So I'm going to measure 2 1/4 from my pretty edge. I'm just going to draw a dot like that. And then I'm going to use my square to draw that line. So I am keeping this, getting rid of this. Before I proceed, I'm just going to double check to make sure that my line is at 2 1/4 or 2 8/32. So yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so we need to remove all the material and we need to get right to that line. Now we could use the disc sander first, but that's going to be a lot of sanding. So what we're gonna do is we're going to use the bandsaw over here and we're just going to remove close to the line, but you want to leave a little bit left to sand on the disc and belt. When you're cutting on the bandsaw, you want to cut freehand. You do not need to use the fence, and you're going to cut just a little bit before the line. Don't forget, you're going to want to use a push stick. I'm going to start to use my push stick now. And as you can see, I have cut close to the line, but I haven't cut to the line yet. I'm going to remove the rest of that material using the disc and belt sander. Now we're at the disc sander. We're going to sand as close as we can to that line there now. So when you're using the disc sander, you want to use this half of the disc and you want to have the majority of the wood on this half, because the disc sander spins like this. Because if you use this half, the disc sander will pick up the piece and send it flying. Now, when you're holding it, you're going to hold it like this up against the sander. This part, because it's on this half, is prone to lifting. So you'll need to keep good pressure down as you're running it on the sander like this. So now we're going to sand to the line. now, before you proceed with the next step, make sure that the drawer front that you just cut and sanded, make sure that this top here, lines up with the top of the slot there, and the bottom lines up with the bottom of the case there. If that's the case, you're good to go. If not, you might need to remake another piece. Now at this stage, to install the drawer onto the metal tray, you're going to need the metal tray. You're going to need a screwdriver, 6 3/8 screws, and some yellow masking tape. So you're going to begin by grabbing 3 of these screws, and you're going to insert the screws through the holes so that the pointy part sticks out like this. So it should look like this with the pointy part sticking out. Next, go ahead, grab some yellow tape, and you're going to tape this down. And the purpose of this yellow tape is it just keeps the screw in place for the next step. You're going to repeat the step for these other screws. Now, if you've done this right, you essentially have 3 points. 1, 2, 3. So next, you've got your case. You're going to need a piece of scrap wood. Typically, you're going to need a 1/2 inch scrap. And what you're just going to do is you're just going to lay it down onto the bottom of your case there. Take your tray with the 3 pointy screws facing out, and you're going to slide that back into your case. If you've done this right, you should have the case sticking out just a little bit, and you should definitely have the screws proud and definitely sticking out like this. So these 3 points essentially will tell you where to drill the pilot hole for you to put your drawer. So now this is the stage you want to spend your love, time, and care with. You are going to take your drawer front and you want to make sure that it's nice and flat and nice and flush with the bottom of the case, and that these ends are nice and flat and nice and flush with the ends over here. Once everything is nicely lined up, you can go ahead and press down onto the screws. And you can hear the screws indenting the wood. Now when you pull this off, you're going to have 3 marks. 1, 2, 3. And these correspond with these screws. 1, 2, and 3. Now this gives you a rough approximation of where you need to drill your pilot hole. So what you're going to do is you're going to start and you're going to mark this part with an X, and we're going to drill a pilot hole here. So you're going to need a 1/16 inch drill bit. And when you're drilling, you don't want to drill all the way through. You kind of want to drill through a little bit past the halfway point. So to ensure that you don't accidentally drill all the way through, what I've done is I put a little bit of green tape on the end. So I know that when I'm drilling and I hit that green tape, I should stop. If I don't have that green tape, I'm going to accidentally drill all the way through, and I'm going to have ugly holes on the front. When you're drilling, always make sure your piece is clamped down. So I'm going to use my vise. Now I've got my hand drill, and I'm going to go ahead and drill into that hole there. I don't need to center punch because that screw has already made that indent for me. And so I've got my drill, I've put it in there. I'm going to drill my hole right there. I'm just drilling until the top of the green tape hits the top of the surface. All right, I'm there. I'm going to pull the trigger and I'm going to lift up. And there's my little pilot hole. Okay, with this hole drill, it's easy to lose track of which side goes where. So what I like to do is I like to bring my case back and double check, okay, this hole goes right here. So I'm going to take this out. I'm going to remove all of the screws here, and I'm going to just take one screw, and I'm going to slide that in to this one here. I'm going to attach this into this pilot hole with my screwdriver now. So I've got that lined up. I'm now going to use my screwdriver and I'm going to screw that in. Don't worry about this flopping back and forth. That's not a problem. Our idea is just to get this screw in. Okay, this screw is in, but this can flop back and forth. That's normal. It's supposed to be like that. We're going to bring this back into the case. I'm going to put this back down inside. Okay. At this point, we can do some readjustment. We can readjust this piece so that this bottom here is flush or flat with the bottom here. All right. That's looking good. It's nice and flush. Gently pull that out. Be careful not to shift it. Take your pencil and you're going to draw a dot in the second hole. That tells you where you're going to drill your second pilot hole. So unfortunately, this is the frustrating part. You're going to have to unscrew this again. But I know that I need to drill my second pilot hole here. So clamp it up in the vise. Grab your hand drill with the flag on it. And you're going to drill that second hole, that second pilot hole. Take that out of the vise. And now we're going to screw this into here. We're going to add another screw to screw this into here. I'm going to rearrange it. So I'm going to flop and rearrange it so that that hole lines up with my pilot hole that I drew, and I'm going to put a second screw in there. For our case, we're going to put this back in. Okay, make sure everything that is still flat and still flush. Everything is, I'm happy, which means I got to drill the last hole. So yes, you figured it out. We're going to pull this out again. Lay that flat on the table. Take your pencil. You're going to draw a dot on that third hole to tell you where to make that third mark. And you're now going to go ahead and unscrew these ones again. So as you can see, I gotta drill my pilot hole there. And yes, you guessed it. This is the final time we're going to put those screws in. We're going to put a screw in here, a screw in here, and finally that last screw in there. This. Huzzah! I've got this on. I can now get rid of my scrap block. I can now put this inside my drawer, and I've mounted the very first panel onto the drawer. So once you've got this front panel in, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to measure out the panel for this piece here, the top panel. So to do that, you're going to measure from the top of this lip here, top of the case, to the top of this slot here. So if I take my ruler, I'm going to go right up against the top of the slot there, and I'm going to take my reading over here. I'm reading 2 16 over 32, otherwise known as 2 1/2. So you guessed it. Take your piece, take your ruler. I'm going to mark 2 1/2. Take your square. And draw there's my 2 1/2 inch line. Now in this scenario, I don't have very much material to remove, so I would just skip the bandsaw step and go right to the disc sander step. And of course, once you've got it down to size, you're doing this all over again.